As we think about hurricane season within a pandemic, the definition of who we think of as vulnerable has changed because COVID adds a different layer of vulnerability in terms of who would normally volunteer to shelters, in terms of who would normally decide to hunker down at home. But the economic challenges of COVID-19 has also then meant that a lot of people don't have the resources to evacuate. And that was one of the key interesting messages was we're not telling you to evacuate hundreds of miles. If it's safe to just evacuate 10 or 20 miles, that's all you need to do is get out of danger, because we recognize that a lot more people don't have the resources to evacuate for maybe long periods of time. And that was kind of the impetus for why we proposed to look at the compounding threat of a hurricane during a public health pandemic. On purpose, we tried to make sure that we had kind of the gamut in terms of sectoral representatives. So we had federal agencies, state agencies, localities across the Eastern Seaboard. But then we also wanted to make sure that we had nonprofit representatives, but then also businesses and private sector interests. And it started basically kind of with a brief overview of the issues. And then we broke out into breakout rooms, with the idea being we wanted to give people the opportunity to talk and to raise their questions and to have discussion rather than, 120 people trying to talk all at once. People need to think about sheltering as the last resort, primarily because there are going to be major challenges with how we staff shelters, because we've primarily relied on local government staff. And the staff that would normally who would work those shelters are the same staff that have been dealing on the front lines with COVID. So there's a lot of mental fatigue, physical fatigue, compassion fatigue. And I think those are critical for us to recognize that the shelters are not going to be just different physically, because there will have to be some social distancing. There might have to be isolation if that can be managed. A lot more touchless, a lot more separation, a lot more things that might have to be done by remote. So the shelters themselves are going to look very different, but the nature of the services provided by those shelters are also going to be, I think, very different as well.